Batman is blessed with what many would consider the best supporting cast of characters in fiction. Joker, Catwoman, Alfred, Commissioner Gordon, Bane, all iconic in their own right, and thankfully, for the most part, the Batman Arkham series did a really good job at adapting them from the pages of the comics to the gaming landscape. Characters like Batman and the Joker were given faithful, fresh, or downright memorable adaptations, but the question is, who is the cream of the crop, the best of the best? Well, that's what we're here to figure out today, but rather than just telling you who the best are, I figured why not go for a top 4, a Mount Rushmore, so to speak. For those of you who don't know what Mount Rushmore is, it's a giant monument in America which features the faces of 4 of the most influential, acclaimed and important presidents in the country's formative years. So in this context, we'll be dwindling down the huge cast of the Arkhamverse to 4, based on influential actions in the series, their total appearances, and of course how well-rounded they are in terms of their portrayal within the Arkham universe. Design will also be taken into account but won't be as important as the other metrics, and it's also important to note that actions or appearances outside of the Arkham series will not be taken into account. But to keep things open and interesting, Batman and the Joker are both exempt, meaning that they won't be eligible for selection, or our first 2 slots would be pretty easy to fill, and would make picking our final 2 characters extremely difficult. So before we get into this, if you like Batman and Arkham stuff, hit the subscribe button, because that's what we do around here, and it's always a good time. And we're on the road to 20,000 subscribers, so let's get there sooner rather than later, and if you like the video, leave a like. It genuinely does help push the video out there, and it means more people can tell me how wrong I am, which I'm sure a few of you will love to do. But I want to get some revenge, so let me know your Arkham Mount Rushmore down below. Anyway, without further ado, let's get right into it. So, starting off, I've whittled down a list of 20 characters down to a core 4, who I think make up the Arkham Mount Rushmore based off of my criteria. I'll be giving mentions to the 20 I picked, but they're kind of just here to fill the numbers out. I wanted to start off big though, and the first name that came to mind was Killer Croc. Not because of my unhealthy obsession with him, but because Croc actually appears in Asylum, City, Night, Origins, and technically Shadow through a little Easter egg, so Croc has one of the best appearance rates in the series, and in terms of being a staple of the franchise, he's pretty solid. His Asylum encounter is iconic and scared an entire generation of kids, his Origins fight is a great punctuation mark on a stellar tutorial, his City appearance is an iconic bit of Arkham's world building, and his Arkham Knight story in Season of Infamy goes a really long way to humanise the former circus performer. His designs are also some of the best in the series. His Asylum and City designs are probably my outright favourite Croc designs ever, and his Night and Origins designs aren't half bad either. I think Croc gets a lot of love in the series, but let's be real, there's only one name, one man who could really fill the first spot on Arkham Mount Rushmore, and that is the man who broke the bat. Bane. Bane wasn't the first name on my list though. In fact, he nearly didn't make it on, but I just couldn't make this list without him. Now what's interesting is that Bane doesn't do particularly well in very many categories here. In terms of total appearances though, Bane appears in Asylum, City, Origins and Blackgate, which is a pretty respectable 4 out of 6 if we're taking Asylum, City, Origins, Night, Blackgate and Shadow into account. His designs are okay at worst and absolute perfection at best. His Asylum and City designs are pretty divisive, but his Origins design is just the peak of the mountain for Bane. Where he really shines and why he gets onto this list is purely down to his actions and portrayal in Batman Arkham Origins. It's probably not a surprise to most of you, but on this Mount Rushmore, he simply wouldn't look out of place, and I feel like this singular, perfect appearance in Arkham Origins gets him on here. But I have to say, his boss fight and influence in Asylum also contributed to his inclusion. Bane was the lab rat for the Titan formula, and revealed to Batman that Dr. Penelope Young wasn't all she was cracked up to be, by referring to her as a Bruja, which led Batman down that rabbit hole and ultimately led to the rest of the night's events. His boss fight isn't great, but it is iconic, and that goes a long way to adding a bit of credibility to this choice. But as I said before, his Origins appearance seals the deal for me, and he might be the only character capable of making an all-time best Arkham list based on in one single appearance. Others do come close, but no one quite does. See, I think even if we take away Bane's Asylum and City inclusions, we don't really lose much, and he'd still make the list purely from his origins portrayal. Other characters have great singular appearances, but wouldn't make the list if not for actions in other games to boost them. Bane though? Bane is just so undeniably great, it's hard to not keep him here. In terms of feats, he very nearly wins. He pretty quickly deduces Batman's identity, breaks into Wayne Manor and the Batcave, actually technically manages to kill Alfred before Bruce is able to revive him, and he nearly mentally pushes Batman into retirement in year 2 of the Dark Knight's career. He also has a much larger impact on the overarching Arkham narrative than I gave him credit for initially when making this list. He ends up showing Bruce he can't protect Gotham alone, which leads to Bruce letting Alfred truly help him and become part of his world, and it also leads to Bruce letting Dick Grayson join his crusade after the events of Arkham Shadow. Bane's impact cannot be understated. There's countless videos out there about why Bane is so good in this game specifically. He feels like a truly accurate and faithful portrayal of the character in the Nightfall story. He's smart, mentally powerful, physically strong, and the perfect foil to a young and reckless Dark Knight. He pushes Batman to his limits, and I believe he's only beaten in the end because he takes the TN1 formula, and he basically ruins his own cognitive functions, which is why he falls short in Asylum and City. He is his own downfall, and in a way, I think this was the biggest saving grace for Batman, because if Bane had more time, there's no doubt in my mind he'd have taken Batman out, if not on Christmas Eve, then pretty soon after. With all that being said, Bane is my first pick, and for me the peak of Arkham's characterizations, the peak of its faithfulness, and the best character in Arkham Origins with a strong argument to be the single best character in the franchise. For our second spot, there was a lot of internal debate about who had the most impact on Batman in particular. Tim Drake was thrown about for his underrated but pretty important feats in the series, or even Commissioner Gordon, but in all honesty, he's kind of a passenger rather than a driver in the Arkham universe, so he got thrown on the back burner. I even considered Nightwing. I know it was an odd thought process that led me there, but it never really got past the note stage, before I quickly realised he does little to nothing outside of Arkham Knight. Catwoman also very nearly made it into the list for me. She's probably the most useful in-field help Batman gets across the series, especially throughout Arkham City and Arkham Origins. Without Selina in Arkham City, Batman would have probably been left in the rubble of the Joker's funhouse for too long to stop Protocol 10 before it really got out of hand, and in Arkham Origins Blackgate, she's one of the main reasons that whole story happens, so she's definitely a pivotal point there. But unfortunately, due to her either not appearing in games like Asylum and Shadow, or even being kidnapped by the Riddler in Arkham Knight, she just misses out because of not appearing, or spending a majority of one appearance being locked up. That simply is not good enough to get yourself on the Arkham Mount Rushmore. So, in terms of Batman's allies, I think there's only one man who can take the slot, and that is, of course, Alfred Pennyworth. Probably one of the easiest choices to make on this list in hindsight. Alfred fills out the second slot as the grounded voice of reason across Batman's nightly escapades. It's again in Arkham Origins where Alfred really shines, as he tries to get through to a younger, angrier and more mission-focused Bruce in his second year of crime fighting. The big scene with Alfred is obviously the "you're not some hardened vigilante" scene, because this is where Alfred gives Bruce a reality check and says if he continues this fight, he will lose because he's outmatched by these assassins who are trying to claim the bounty on his head. This sends Bruce into a rage and the two argue, but later make up when Bruce saves Alfred from death at the hands of Bane. It's a great dynamic and arguably the best dynamic in the whole series, and one that, outside of the argument, doesn't seem to get brought up a whole bunch when discussing not only the Alfred character, but Origins as a whole. Alfred can also give wisdom to Bruce, which actually grants the player XP, so even in a gameplay sense, Alfred is helping out, and he also makes sure to give a bit of comedic relief throughout the series, giving his dry wit and humour to an often dark and serious game series. Alfred is instrumental across the series, and has one final truly great outing in Batman Arkham Knight. He only makes one actual physical appearance right at the end when Bruce activates the Nightfall Protocol and kills Batman, but throughout the game and over the the comms, he is Batman's go-to guy, as he always should be. He helps find the Arkham Knight's base, he helps track the Cloudburst device, he even, in a rare feat for supporting members of the Bat family in this series, goes through the entire game series without being kidnapped or taken hostage, which is pretty commendable. I think, though, one of Alfred's main contributions to the saga would be when he managed to convince Batman to go after Hugo Strange in Wonder Tower to stop Protocol 10, rather than risk thousands of lives to go and save Talia al Ghul from the Joker, which was, without a shadow of a doubt, the right call to make, and definitely one of Alfred's defining moments in this series, once again being the voice of reason for Batman. It's also worth noting that he actually defended Wayne Manor along with Robin and Nightwing during the events of Arkham City when Hugo Strange sent his Tiger Guards to the manor, and even when we measure his appearances, he appears in City, Night, Shadow and Origins, even appearing in Arkham VR and the Assault on Arkham movie, which, although not important for our exercise today, do prove how invaluable Alfred always has been to Bruce, even in the Arkham games. Without Alfred Pennyworth, I don't think Batman would have gotten as far as he did in the series, whether it be failing in Arkham City, not making it through Scarecrow and the Arkham Knight in his final outing, or even continuing his journey as the Dark Knight after Bane's break-in and subsequent mental breakdown of Batman. As in most Batman media, Alfred really is the MVP of the Bat family, and so he etches himself into Arkham's Mount Rushmore. For the third slot, I wanted to try and go a bit deeper, think a bit more about which character set the most major events into play, or made the plays no one else could have. And every time I kept coming back to one name. But before I reveal that person, let me go through my thought process. Initially, I had thought about possibly adding Hugo Strange to my Mount Rushmore. I mean, he orchestrated the biggest mass murder in the Arkham series, he deduced Batman's identity, and dare I say he won, in a way? I mean, it's a bit of a strenuous win, but Batman did stop Protocol 10, but only after hundreds of inmates were maimed, injured, and killed. One of the big reasons he didn't quite make it in, though, was that he was a puppet for Ra's al Ghul, and speaking of puppets, I very nearly put the Mad Hatter on here. Yes, genuinely. For those of you who don't know, Mad Hatter was actually instrumental in the whole Arkham City project, with the Hatter working under Hugo Strange to get former Warden of Arkham Asylum, Quincy Sharp, under the Mad Professor's thumb. Strange would also use Hatter's mind control formulas to create the formidable Tiger Guards, adding the fact he tricked Batman into believing he had a cure made for him by Lucius Fox, his fun little romp in Arkham Knight and his harrowing trip down the rabbit hole in Origins, and I genuinely very nearly put him on here, but I just didn't think he was important enough in the main story, or did enough by way of memorable moments to merit his inclusion, as most of his huge contributions come between games or off-screen. So, with all that being said, my third pick for the Mount Rushmore is none other than Poison Ivy. I know, a rogue pick, and one I had debated leaving out, but I just couldn't do it. I know it's probably the most controversial choice in this list so far, but when I was making notes, thinking and rewriting, the former Doctor just kept coming back into my mind, and not because of her character design, which, by the way, is pretty damn good, and personally it's one of my favourite designs for the character, which is a bonus for her, but I just kept thinking back to Arkham Asylum. Once Ivy is given the Titan formula by Joker, she destroys Arkham Island with her plants, leaving it to rot, and ultimately this would lead to Arkham City not only finally being put into action, but by all accounts being the final push over the edge to put Arkham City into action so quickly. I think Ivy's time in Arkham Asylum was used very well, from her release from the Green Mile right through to her end. When she's released, she causes enough things to happen to not only the asylum, but the story going forward. She tells Batman where the spores are to formulate a cure for the Titan, which ultimately leads to Batman being able to heal himself and stop Joker towards the end of the night. As I mentioned here, Ivy's plants destroy Arkham Asylum, and then we get to Arkham City, where she doesn't do too much, although in Arkham Knight, her final appearance is what solidified her inclusion here for me. See, Poison Ivy is one of the most overlooked characters in Batman Arkham Knight, and I get it. On the surface, her missions are hardly the most thrilling parts of the game. You're driving around, tracking plants, it's not exactly the Mr. Freeze boss fight in Arkham City. But here's the thing, when you strip away the gameplay pacing and look at what she actually does for the story, she suddenly becomes vital. Without Ivy, Batman loses, full stop. He has no counter to the cloudburst, no way to clear the toxin, no last minute miracle waiting in the wings. So while her missions might not get the blood pumping, her impact on the narrative is huge, and that alone earns her far more credit than she would usually get. Without her, Gotham would have most definitely torn itself apart. The infected would have overrun the streets, the militia would have probably ended up tightening their grip, and Batman wouldn't have been able to answer. That is the reality of the situation. And what makes it hit even harder is who she is. This is someone who openly resents humanity, someone who blames mankind for the suffering of her quote-unquote babies. She has every reason to stand back and let the city choke on its own poison, but she doesn't. In her final moment, she chooses to save it. Not the plants, not the green, Gotham. That choice proves there was still something human left in her, no matter how deeply she tried to bury it. That sacrifice is also what locks her infamy. She might not be the loudest or the most iconic presence in the Arkham series, but in terms of impact, she is undeniable. Quietly, almost subtly, she becomes one of the most important figures in the entire saga, and one of the most underrated faces of the franchise. Our final spot had to be a big one, someone so influential and synonymous with the Arkham franchise that leaving them off would have been disrespectful. Some names that crossed my mind were Oracle, having appeared in Origins, Asylum, Shadow, City and Night. She definitely made a good case at being the final place on the list. We also had Aaron Cash, who despite not appearing in Origins, Shadow or Blackgate, is iconic and as beloved as perhaps even some of the larger name characters. And he is iconic, but not quite impactful enough to make this list. Other characters that made the shortlist were Harley Quinn. I mean, she appears in a handful of the games, is a main villain / supporting character in all of the games, and I think she definitely had an outside chance of getting herself in here, but even then, I don't think she quite does enough to Batman or the overall story to get herself into the last place. A few other names I had on the list were the Arkham Knight, Ra's al Ghul, the Riddler, and Robin, but ultimately, I think there was only one name capable of filling the last spot, and for me, without a shadow of a doubt, it was Jonathan Crane, aka the Scarecrow. For me, Scarecrow is the outright greatest villain in the series after the Joker. I'd argue he's probably even better than the Joker. Not because he has the flashiest boss fights or even the most screen time, but because he does the one thing no other villain manages to do. He wins. Not in a Batman escapes at the last second and everything is fine kind of way. He wins publicly. He breaks the bat on live television. He unmasks Bruce Wayne to the entire world and shatters the illusion of Batman that Gotham had been clinging onto for years now. Across the series, Jonathan Crane proves he's anything but a pushover. He's not loud like Joker or physically dominant like Bane. He's patient, and he's an underlying, constant, quiet reminder that no matter how bad things get in Gotham, they can always get worse. I mean, go back to Arkham Shadow and look at what he's doing there. He plays a direct role in the creation of Two-Face. He runs experiments on Blackgate inmates. And the most disturbing part is he does all this while doing this as a doctor, a man of science. Moving on to his next appearance in Asylum, and I'd argue despite not being a main player in the night's events, this is his most iconic performance. And hell, this might be the single most memorable appearance in the franchise in general, only because of that classic fake game crash, which made so many people think their copy of Arkham Asylum had broken. The first Scarecrow segment is as iconic as it is harrowing. The second is a great walk down memory lane for first-time players, and the third is absolutely genius, and probably the single most iconic segment in the whole series. I also love how comically evil he is. He wants to flood the sewers with fear toxins, and it's such a great kind of faithfully comic booky scheme that I can't help but love him for it. Crane doesn't show up again until Arkham Knight after laying the groundwork for his plan in Arkham City, but even in City he makes small but memorable waves. When someone says Arkham City Easter egg, you probably either think about Killer Croc, or Scarecrow's radio messages, or even his little hideout in the boat in the amusement mile. The point is, even here, he is so good. Fast forward to Arkham Knight and he begins to really truly shine, as his performance here is absolutely incredible. He's fearsome, cold, and his plan is one which puts Batman's back against the wall and truly makes him sweat. It means he has no choice but to let Nightwing, Robin, Oracle, Gordon, Cash, and the rest of the Arkham universe's Bat friends and family help out, and Batman has to drop the stoic performances from the previous Rocksteady games. And in a way, Scarecrow brings the best out of Batman and thus the rest of the cast, good or evil. I've done an entire video on the greatness of Scarecrow in the Arkham universe, and I don't want to retread old ground, but I could talk for hours about how much I absolutely adore Jonathan Crane in this series, and that's not even touching his designs, which I hold as some of my favourite designs of the Master of Fear ever. His asylum design is creepy and almost blends into the uncanny valley, with his skin being a strange colour and the mask almost looking attached to his head. And that design philosophy is completely followed with his Knight design, which is downright disturbing and, much like the character himself, broken in all of the best ways. So that's my Mount Rushmore of Arkham characters, and just for a reminder, it would be Bane, Alfred Pennyworth, Poison Ivy, and the Scarecrow. I do have one more little surprise for you all, but before that, let me know what your Arkham Mount Rushmore would be, excluding Batman and the Joker. And if you want to, you can leave one with the Batman and Joker in as well, just to make sure you've got all bases covered. But I wouldn't want to leave you without this list. Mount Rushmore with Batman and Joker. So pretty self-explanatory, the first two names would be Batman and the Joker for obvious reasons. They're the main characters, they get the most screen time and development, and obviously this is really their franchise. And Kevin Conroy, Roger Craig Smith, Mark Hamill, and Troy Baker all combine to create such an iconic pair of dynamics between the Dark Knight and the Clown Prince of Crime. Narrowing myself down to two picks was really tricky, but purely for staying power and impact on the story, I decided to cut Poison Ivy, and this one hurts, but Bane. I had to cut Bane. So that means I had to keep Scarecrow and Alfred, leaving my ultimate Arkham Mount Rushmore as Batman, Joker, Scarecrow, and Alfred, which I think is a nice split, 50% hero, 50% villain. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this little thought experiment. If you liked it, don't forget to drop a like. I will see you next time. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.